So when you look at areas like this, even if animals had wanted to use this area for themselves for shelter, you can see by the leaf litter that's completely untrue. Once Lantana gets to a certain point and is taking over at that point, the animals just simply leave the area. They do not persist with where the Lantana is. And it's one of the fallacies that the greenies and the government have been trying to furnish for a very long time, to try to justify saying, well, now it's a naturalized plant, which it can never be a naturalized plant, because the sheer ferocity of this plant in its taking over habitats, this plant will never be naturalized in Australia, because it's just, it could be the dominant plant, but it can never be a part of that system because it's just too voracious. And you know, by the dollar figure and the actual infestation size, you know, this plant is can never be allowed to be you know, to be left alone. It's that bad, and the number of other plants that it moves with, you know, makes that a real problem. You know, they talk about birds nesting in this stuff here, and I've pulled out thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hectares of this material, and I've seen one bird's nest in it in all that time, in the 40 odd years, and that was actually in the cockspur. It wasn't in the lantana. When you look all through the material itself, while it looks like it makes sense that little birdies would hide in here, it's a load of rubbish. It's an absolute load of rubbish. And when this material wasn't here, they would have hid somewhere else. Okay, but the sheer volume and vigor of this plant in its expansion rate, and the way it then has vines and stuff like that go with it, means that it's that voracious in taking over habitat. There is no chance for anything else to come back once these plants take over, and the leaf litter is your proof. Look, I'm of indigenous heritage, and I love watching and looking for what animals are where they are, and nothing's been underneath these materials where I pull them out at all. Like, everywhere you stick a camera and you look, no disturbance at all in the leaf litter. You know, you've got people with hidden agendas that are scientists working for the government trying to pretend, and the environment and heritage mob, the biosecurity, they're all got an agenda to tell you to leave this material, because the dollar value for the millions of hectares on government lands means they'd like to convince people to leave it. Right up until the point, and this is the problem, right up until the point until the poo hits the fan and the public realises how badly they've been conned, and the backlash that is coming for those government departments is absolutely extreme, because there's no way in the wide world they weren't aware that nothing was using this material. Like, these people are supposed to be spending as much time in the field. You look at this this spiky apple, and you see how many of the seeds it's generating, all mixed in amongst this weeds material. Just amazing how big a problem all of this is. And if you look across these surfaces, you can see how this stuff spreads coming down from the mountainsides. So it just continues an enormous eco-tragedy, while the Greens and the government try to pretend that none of this is happening. You know, this is a 2-inch camera, and in most places I can't put it into the what's-name properly, but you look, you would think that this material would harbour, even from a shelter purpose, from rain, from, you know, tough weather, but all of the grasses prove, and the leaf litter proves, that nothing is using this material. And the seeding of this material, when you look all over it, is absolutely massive. You look at the spiky apple, all absolutely in plague proportions. Plague proportions everywhere. And you can see how big a problem these things are. And this is what we're told is okay. All the spiky apple, horrible plant. And nothing at all has walked underneath these materials. And the greens say, well, some little birdie uses it. That's the interesting lie that everybody has been told. The only bird that's using it is the bellbird, bell miner bird, and it's causing collapse of the forestry in massive ecological disaster. On every other level, the government says, and those departments and the Greens say that some other little bird may use it. Now, ground level, nothing's been under this material at all, even in a track, even in a corridor, nothing. And I can do this forever. I could film this forever. No nests, no birds in here. The tree died, fell over, and it's consumed a lot. Spiky apple going crazy. Wild cotton, or whatever they call that crap. And it just continues and continues through these systems. But as it seeds and spreads from this position, it spreads straight through all of the watercourse and down through the rainforest. Now people will tell you it can't survive in the rainforest, and that's a lie. Seen this stuff 40 and 60 feet through the top of the rainforest, especially like that rainforest in the beginning up here, where you can see the cockspur hanging out of the top of the trees at 60-80 feet off the ground. The lantana can match that because it uses the cockspur to climb. That's one of those ecological systems that I explained, where lantana's moving with cockspur and using the strengths of both plants to complement each other to conquer rainforests and other areas. Then the vines come in with them, so they're moving in a group of 5 or 6 different plant groups and creating a supercell, and in that they then drop the canopy, they outweigh the canopy collapses and falls down, and then they're able to just consume the rest of the tree, collapse the tree, often it'll break the crown out of the tree, create the window of sunlight down into the base of the rainforest, and then off she goes like a bomb. This is something that the government doesn't tell you. It's happening all over our nation, and there's a reason they don't tell you. They don't want you to react, and they don't want you to be aware. They don't want you to know that animals aren't using this, but koalas can't get from tree to tree and get killed on the ground, which Australia Zoo says. Get killed on the ground trying to get from tree to tree. You know, in Moreton Bay Regional Council area alone, in one instance, they had 11 koalas killed. 8 of them with one dog, and the other 3 with 2 other dogs. So at the end of the day, you know, they're well and truly aware of the disaster that is falling koalas, and yet the government completely allows this material, with the Greens' support, to grow completely unabated through every national park. Come on, premiers, you put some names of national parks up that you want us to go and have a look at, of the premier ones, and we'll go and have a look at those ones, and I'll still find lantana there. But they're through every national park. Even the heritage listed national parks like Fraser Islands are a disaster of lantana, to the point that they incorporate four-wheel drive groups to do the work for them and pull them out with winches. But there's a story not being told that is the catastrophe of a $30 billion a year problem that would just be, if we're trying to deal with 6 million hectares at the best possible outcomes, right? If that material was in steeper country, it could be $60 billion just to meet the growth rate, not the actual mass of the plant, just the growth rate. $60 billion, and our premiers changed the classification on lantana to low risk. The question to you, the general public, is ask them, where did they get low risk? And these figures are actually real, so let's put the figures on the table and let's explain where low risk came from. Let's explain how the premiers have allowed the councils and the government departments to operate outside of the law, and they've had this information for 16 months and they still have not acted at all. Only when the ABC reporter contacted them, the Queensland government said they got $9 million allocated to Lantana. $9 million would not pay for the coffees for the committees to meet to discuss what stationery colour they're going to use for their meetings. It's absolutely obscene that finally the ABC gets actually spoken to, where I've been putting this information on the Premier's desk for 16 months and the Prime Minister's, and yet they've never came up with those figures before. The councils have said from the beginning of 2000, or the end of 2017, beginning of 2018, that there's 0 operations in Lantana. Now suddenly they say, the government says there's a $9 million. It's $9 million, like I said, it wouldn't buy the coffee. No, we need to be asking the proper questions. How are the departments meeting their legal obligations, and how have they been meeting those obligations for the last 20 years? Let's start with national parks. How much money does the national park spend on Lantana eradication? What parks, how many staff, and when were they doing this? Also, where is this $9 million and where is it being spent, and what was the outcomes of the $9 million? You know, nothing's been furnished, only a figure thrown up, and the figure is a joke, is an absolute joke. That wouldn't cover anything, that thing. So we need to, now that they're actually taking it seriously enough to answer the ABC, let's ask the questions properly. You know, these fires didn't just happen, they happened because of the Lantana being allowed to get to the catastrophe levels that they've been allowed to get to. And it's time we dealt with that subject and we asked those questions. You can't have weeds pouring off mountainsides like the Montville Range there over, you know, hundreds of kilometres and nothing being done about it at all. And those weeds affect every single tributary, ravine and gully off those surfaces. And when you have a look up on the top up there on Google Earth, you can go through the Boran Dam, all of that. They're just a cesspool of Lantana and other weeds. So what are they doing about it? There's 32 of the weeds, Lantana's one of them, and Lantana's that price, and they're doing nothing about it. But anyway, that's enough for now. That's a few questions for you to ask the Greens, because they doubled this material in 10 years. If they had any idea of what they were doing, or they had any policies that were of any value, then it wouldn't be doubled, it would have been at least met the growth rate. But it's quadrupling now, it's not doubling this time, and it will be much more than quadrupling on the next 10 after this 10. We're already a year into it, so we've got 9 years left in this 10-year cycle, and it'll be 50 million hectares and a $300 billion problem conservatively. With the country that they're allowing this material to get into, the steepness and the terrain, that 300 billion is probably more like $900 billion, okay? In real terms, in an honest, if you're knuckling down the figures, it'd be something like that. But it doesn't stop there. Like the government's saying to you, just pretend it doesn't exist and it'll all be okay. It doesn't stop there. It just continues to grow and grow and grow, and exponentially. So it's not growing by the same value. It's quadrupling, and then whatever the figures after that become. You know, you got one plant in the right water area can give you 3,600 plants. In an area where it only gets one decent rain a year, you're guaranteed to 400 plants. They're still ridiculous growth rates, and they've known those growth rates since the early 1900s, right? In the early 1900s, so probably, or let's say from 1980 onwards, we guarantee that's written down figures. So what happens from here? There is no future thing run by government at this point, because they have turned their back on it. But it can't last like this, because people with their homes are actually paying the price for this. Their children's financial security is what's at stake here. So anyway, I'm Gary, lantanaremovalqueensland.com.au. Thank you for popping in, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye. degrees standard, and then it gets complicated after that. But we can go steeper than that. We have methods for doing that. So give us a call. We operate out of Narangba in Queensland, and we're the only ones that care about this subject. Anyway, thanks very much for popping in. Catch you on the next one.